sure. You'll need it. Hi, everyone. How are we doing? Okay, well, that's good. My plan here for today is we're going to take some questions. We're going to do our homework quiz, and then talk a little bit about the test format, and then you'll have the remaining time in class to work on the review or whatever else you might need. Sergio?
I kind of have a general question. So, are there inequalities? Have you ever had no solution?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that actually should happen on the homework one in a couple of cases.
Did it happen on homework?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on homework one, on some of those inequalities, you should have gotten no solution for a few of them. Okay. So we'll just start out with questions from homework, and we'll do that for, I don't know, a half an hour or so, or until we run out of questions, kind of whichever comes first. And then we'll stop. We'll talk about the test format, and then take the homework quiz, and whatever quiz we will give you guys to work on your review or whatever else, okay? Sound good? Sergio?
For homework one, can you show me one of the inequalities that Jack
Sure. So this will be the first question. So looking right away, 23 has no solution. Take a moment and look at the problem and think about it for a second and see if you can see immediately why it should be no solution. Okay, can an absolute value give something that's less than a negative?
Oh, no.
No, so that one should be no solution.
Oh, okay.
Immediately, without even thinking anything more about it, there's no way the absolute value can output a number that's less than negative 25. No solution. Does that feel okay there?
Yeah.
So that's the sort of situation you would need to run into for there to be no solution, is where you end up with like absolute value less than negative. Hold on. I know it's Evan. No, I don't know then. Jack. What's your last name? Mueller. Okay. Thank you, Jack. Yes, that's perfectly fine. Ava, this is for you. You said 14?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the first thing we'd want to do is to isolate the absolute value part, but that part's already been done for us, so we'll go straight into splitting this into two pieces. So the first piece, all I did was remove the absolute value symbols. And on the second piece, we remove the absolute value symbols and we negate the right-hand side. So that negative is going to distribute through the parenthesis. So I really have minus 10 minus 3x. Now we'll just solve these two equations separately. So let's subtract 9 from both sides. And then we'll, for this one, we'll subtract 3x from both sides. And this one, I'll add 3x to both sides. And this one is done, but this one we need to also divide by negative 5. And now we need to check, right? So I'm going to just use my calculator to do the check. You could do it by hand, or you could do it by inspection. A couple of these, certainly you could justify by inspection. For example, on this one in particular, when I plug Okay, I don't need it open twice, but thank you. When I plug negative 19 into this side, it should be easy to see that you're going to get a negative number, right? And can an absolute value give us a negative? No. So immediately I can discard negative 19 as an extraneous solution. Now you could type, plug those values in or type them into your calculator or whatever to check that as well, but I'm going to just use my noodle there a little bit to justify that to save myself some time, but it's not wrong if you plugged everything in. Was there anybody with a question of how I was able to reason that out without actually having to do anything? Sergio?
You got negative, is that negative 19?
Correct.
But it's times 2, like negative 2, so you're going to make it positive?
Well, I'm just looking at this side.
Oh, you're looking at that side.
Yep. All I cared about was whether this side was positive or negative, and if I plug negative 19 in, it's definitely negative.
Yeah, and then
right?
You can't get.
And I can't have an absolute value giving me a negative, regardless of whatever I put in there. So I just stopped there. The negative 1/5, though, that won't be the case, right? So this one, let's plug in and see if it actually holds. So I'll do the right-hand side first. To get the absolute value symbol, I press the math button. And then I go over to the number menu, and I select the command ABS. You could all do this by hand as well. Then I have 9 minus 2, and then I have times, and then a negative. And then I'm going to write this as a fraction. So I'm going to press the alpha button and the y equals button, and choose that first option, which is the improper fraction option. So there's that. I'll press enter. So I get 47/5. And then I have 10 plus 3 times negative. And then to fraction, I press alpha, y equals, and then just choose the first option, 1/5. And press enter, and you'll see that those two matched. So I will accept this solution as my only answer. Good with that, Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem, my man. Again, if you guys need to turn the lights out because you couldn't see a thing I did on the calculator, please just stand up and turn off the light. Anytime that we're doing stuff and the light's on and you're like, I can't see the board well enough, just stand up and turn off the lights. You don't have to ask. You don't have to say anything. Just stand up and do it if you need it done. Okay? It's important, more important that you can see the board than almost anything else. I think there's probably enough daylight that seeing your paper is not an issue at this point in the day. So, oh, no, hold on. Alonzo is the last name, right? I don't know the first one. Loretta. I get like half credit there, though, right?
Homework 4, number 4.
Sure. So let's see. Homework 4, number 4. Okay. This one is just irritating because of the numbers involved, right? But come on, guys. We're like juniors and sophomores in high school in an honors class. We should be able to deal with a problem with some fractions in it, but that's okay. We'll do it here anyways. No big deal. I'm just hassling you guys a little bit about the fractions. They're so scary. Okay, so I would approach this the same way I would before. So what I want to do is I want to write an equation in this form. And I know immediately that the h and k come from the vertex. So my h value is negative 3/5, and my k value is 7/3. And then I have some other point I can treat as an xy. So when I plug in the x and y and h and k into my equation, that will allow me to solve for a, so there's that. So far, so good, Loretta? Okay. So now I'm going to subtract 7/3 from both sides. But to subtract 7/3 from 6/3, or from 6/7, I need to have a common denominator, right? The common denominator, yes, of course. Between 6/7 and 7/3 is going to be 21. So when I multiply 7/3 by 7/7, I get negative 49/21. And when I multiply negative 6/7 by 3/3, I get negative 18/21. So when I subtract those, that's negative 67/21. So far, so good, Loretta? Alternatively, if you don't trust yourself, we can use our calculator. So if I press alpha and y equals, I'll use that same fraction command there. And I'll do negative 6/7 minus an alpha y equals fraction command 7/3 and press enter, and I get the exact same value. Okay. Similarly, I need to add negative 10/9 and positive 3/5. So again, I need to make a common denominator. Hopefully it's not hard to see that common denominator would be 45. So that's going to be negative 50/45 plus 27/45. So when I add those together, I get negative 23/45. But when I take the absolute value of that, I get a positive. And again, if you don't trust yourself, we can type this in. So negative, and then alpha y equals to get the fraction command 10/9 plus alpha y equals fraction command 3/5. And again, I get negative 23/45, but remember that's inside an absolute value. So I drop the negative when I take the absolute value of it. And then to get the a by itself, I can divide by 23/45, or what's probably easier is to think about it as just multiplying by the reciprocal. And I can see a little bit of reducing that I can do here. Both 45 and 21 contain a factor of 3. And 3 times negative 67, what's that? That's 670 plus 335, so negative 1005. And then 7 times 23 is 161, I think, for A. But again, if you don't trust yourself to do that arithmetic in your head, we can certainly just do it on the calculator. So 45/23 times negative alpha y equals fraction 67/21. And we get negative 1005/161. Does that feel better, Loretta? And again, you're welcome to use your calculator to do the fraction arithmetic. Like, you have the calculator, you can use it. You should be able to do this by hand, but again, in a test setting, I don't blame you for wanting to use the calculator to make sure you did it correctly. Not a big deal. Edmund?
So I just have a super general question. So say the square, the absolute value of 24 is equal to negative. Is that true?
So this is never true. This is false. If we reverse the locations, that is true. Oh, and Loretta, we would go back and rewrite this then, right? I guess for our final answer, we would. It didn't do that. So this would be what we'd write as our final answer. But you knew that. Does that feel okay, everybody? So far, so good? Oh no. We do this every time, don't we? Where you raise your hand and I'm like, oh boy. Yeah, right? I don't. Aaron. Davichik.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do better next time. Okay. So let me scroll back up there. Okay. So this is one that I'm really going to do. Well, I'm going to make my life easier here by doing this by inspection, okay? So again, we noted earlier that an absolute value cannot give me a negative value, right? Here we have the absolute value of stuff is less than or equal to 0. Really, this is equivalent to just the absolute value stuff equal to 0. Because we can't be negative. So the only value that I'm allowed to have from that less than or equal to part is just the equal 0 part. So I'm just going to solve that. That will be my only answer. Does that feel okay? So if I split this up, I get 7x plus 3 equals 0, and then 7x plus 3 equals negative 0. But negative 0 is just 0. So I have the same equation twice. I don't even need that other one. So I'll subtract 3 and then divide by 7. And that'll be my only answer. That's another good question. That one's a little tricky, right? Edmund?
Well, what can you determine from either and or or? What is determined?
Okay. So if I graph my two inequalities on a number line, these previous two that we did were bad examples because we don't end up with two inequalities. But if your situation looks like this, that's the and situation. And if your arrows look like this, that's the or situation. And if they're both facing the same direction, for example, you have this, means you made a mistake. Mackenzie. Well, this one you wouldn't have to because there's no inequality. Because we turned it into just an equation, there's nothing to graph. So I would be fine with you just having provided that you did this to say, okay, it's really the same thing as just this equation. There's nothing to graph at that point, so you don't have to worry about that part. Good question, though. Certainly worth clarifying that, right? Because we didn't do it, and the directions ask you to. So, Jack. Absolutely.
So when you split it for an absolute value inequality, does one side automatically have to flip the equality side?
Yes, the side that you negate, the right-hand side, is the side that whose inequality reverses direction. Very good. Again, these are the right kinds of questions to be asking, clarifying all these finer points and some of these like weird what-if situations. So if something weird happens, you know what to do. I like where your guys' heads are at. These are good questions. Do you guys have some more to ask about? Okay, well, I'm going to talk about the test format for a minute. If after that you have come up with something along the way, I'm happy to do some more. Okay, we haven't really gotten to 30 minutes here, so if you guys change your mind at some point after we talk about the test format, we can certainly come back and do some more. Okay, how's that sound? Pretty fair? All right, so let's So I have 4 solving absolute value equation problems. I have 1 solving an absolute value function problem. I have a stack of tests that was copied incorrectly. One moment. It's good that we found that out now and not tomorrow, right? Yeah, your test is Thursday. But tomorrow I also have another section of this class. So, sorry, I didn't mean to freak you out for a moment there. Yes, your test is Thursday. So we have 2 solving absolute value inequalities. I was looking at it, I'm like, I guess I just didn't put any of those on there. That doesn't seem right. But I just figured I'd go with it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I just went from question 7 to question 9. Where was question 8? And then I looked closer and it's like, that's why there was no inequalities. So one question where we graph an absolute value inequality in 2 variables. And then one question where we go from graph to equation. So that's a modeling question, like homework 4. That's it. There's 9 total questions. Well, I mean, everything is like goes in the grade book as a percentage out of 100, so all the tests are equally weighted. But there's partial credits for all of them, and very much like the homework for like the graphing parts, I'm going to ask you to do lots of things. Right? You remember the graphing homework where I asked you to do like a bunch of different things? Yeah, and do the transformation and all that kind of stuff. So the same format as the review, really. Let me.
Transformations, A, so we're doing anything with A, that'd be like the X reflected.
Yes. Yeah, so the A reflects across the X.
Yeah, so I wrote that down wrong, so I studied it wrong for the test, but that's why. That is
Okay. Yeah. So let's just make sure we write that down. Whoa! That's not what I wanted to have happen. So for transformations, so A less than 0, that's reflect on the x-axis. The magnitude of A bigger than 1 is a vertical stretch. The magnitude less than 1 is a vertical shrink. B less than 0 is reflect on the y. B bigger than 1 is a horizontal stretch. And B less than 1 is a horizontal shrink. Mackenzie?
So for the equations,
so here's the deal, okay? So let's say we had, and this is not something I would give you, but let's just do this for the sake of argument, okay? Let's say we have something like this. Now, if I factor out a -2 here, I have something that looks like this. And if I use my property for simplifying absolute values, I can do this. And simplify a little bit more, I can get to here, right? So in this problem, it looks like I have a horizontal stretch or shrink, right? But it turns out I can just deal with it as a vertical stretch or shrink. And it looks like I have a reflection across the y-axis. But it turns out I can handle that just by shifting left or right. So like if you think about our absolute value graph, say we have something like this. If I reflect across the y-axis, I'd have this, right? That's also the same thing as just going left some amount of units, right? So everything that I can do with B, everything that B can cause, I can use A, H, and K to do. So we just always kind of write it without a B in there, because all those other coefficients can handle anything that the B value is doing. Does that feel okay? So when we write these functions, we never include a B value because we don't need to. It's just simpler to do it with the other three. Now that won't always be the case, but it is for absolute value functions. Tommy.
Can you do number 4 and homework 2, please?
Sure. And just as an FYI with homework 2 here, I noticed looking at looking at some of our homework 2s, I saw some straight lines on our graphs. The graph of an absolute value is always a V or a wedge. There should be no straight lines ever. So if you're graphing one of these and you end up with a straight line, go back and look for a mistake. The most common mistake I saw for people was that you were using the wrong 3 key points. So they use -1, which isn't a point on the absolute value graph. Anyways, Tommy's question, homework 4, number 3, or 4. So the A value is -A, the H is 2, and the K is 4. Any questions with that? Okay. Since the A is less than 0, we have a reflection on the x-axis. Since the magnitude of A is greater than 1, we have a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Since K is greater than 0, we're going to go right 2 units. And since K is bigger than 0, we're going to go up 4 units. Are you good there? Okay. I forget what the directions were asking. What does part C want me to do? Oh, that's not the page. Oh, C is the graph. Okay. So let's write our transformation map then. So I have x plus h, and then ay plus k. So that's going to become -1 plus 2 is 1. -3 times 1 plus 4 is 1. And then 0 plus 2 is 2. And -3 times 0 plus 4 is 4. And then 1 plus 2 is 3. And 1 times -3 plus 4 is 1. So, oh my goodness, this is so small. So I have 1, 1. I have 2, 4. And then I have 3, 1. So there's my graph. You good there? Okay. The domain is always all real numbers for any absolute value function. The range depends on 2 things. It depends on A and K. In our case, A is less than 0, so we know we start at -infinity and we go up to K. If the A was positive, it would be the reverse. We'd start at K and then go up to positive infinity, but there's always a bracket on the K. Does that feel okay, Tommy? Yeah, no problem. So yeah, that's all you have to do for one of these. And the format on the test will look similar to the format from these questions on the review. If I look at the review, how did I format those? So the note on the review, I don't give you the 3 key points for the absolute value, so that is something you want to have memorized. Tommy?
What about the reflection?
That's why it's pointing upside down.
Oh, okay.
So the wedge shape means there's a reflection across the x. That's what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Edmund?
Just want to make sure H is supposed to be.
Yes, so the h is always the opposite of whatever it looks like in the equation.
So the only case for H would be negative if it was minus -2.
Yeah, if you had like x plus 2, that would imply that h is -2. Because you really have minus a -2. Yep, exactly. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Anybody with any last homework questions? Cool. So if you can take out your tablet.